Welcome to the Prepped and Polished Podcast, the podcast that empowers you to take control of your education. Featuring weekly interviews with influencers in the world of education, as well as tutoring tips, lessons, and updates. And now, here's your host, Alexis Avila.
Hi, everyone. This is Alexis Avila of Prepped and Polished. Prepped and Polished is a tutoring and test prep firm that provides in-person and online tutoring for college entrance and grad school tests, private school tests, academic subject tutoring, such as math, science, English, language, study skills, coaching. For more information, please check out preppedandpolished.com. Get to know the Prepped and Polished community. You can find us on Facebook, Prepped and Polished. Go to Twitter, @PreppedPolished, and Instagram, Prepped and Polished 1. And also check out our free SAT course. Go to SATStrategySecrets.com to sign up. And I welcome you back to the Prepped and Polished podcast, where we interview amazing and inspiring guests in the world of education, as well as offer tutoring and test prep tips, lessons, and updates. To our listeners, you can submit a question at any time, radio at preppedandpolished.com. I love hearing from you. Our interview series starts right now with episode 54 with the Transformative Principal, Jethro Jones. Jethro is principal of Kodiak Middle School in Kodiak, Alaska, and host of the Transformative Principal Podcast, where each week he interviews school principals who are making a real difference in the life of his or her students. On today's show, Jethro is going to talk about his podcast and share his findings on who are some of the great innovative principals today and what are some of the qualities that truly make a great principal. Jethro, thanks for coming on the Prepped and Polished podcast. How are you today?
I am doing great, thank you.
Awesome. So, Jethro, can you focus on a couple of moments, pivotal moments from your past that brings you to us today? Today is a principal and a host of your podcast, which is the Transformative Principal Podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I went to a bunch of different schools when I was a kid. I went to 5 elementary schools, 1 middle school, and 3 different high schools. And I saw a lot of different teachers, a lot of different administrators. Don't remember much about any of them. What I remember are those teachers and administrators that made me actually feel like they cared about me as a person. The vice principal that I had when I was the roughest kid, her name was Edie something, and I remember I always called her Dr. Edie, and she really hated that, but she let me do it because she knew that was a small rule I was breaking, and it was much better than me breaking the big rules, and she knew that we were connecting, even though I was calling her Dr. Edie. And it was people like her who were reaching out to make me a better human being that made it possible for me to change my life and become the kind of person that I wanted to be.
That's amazing.
So those people influencing my life made me think that I could do anything that I wanted. And I really believe that right now, that I can do anything I want. And it's largely because of people like that who supported me. And now I chose to be in education so that I could be that kind of person for them, for other students as well.
Wow, that's great. Tell us about the Transformative Principal Podcast. How did you come up with the idea to interview inspiring principals?
Well, I was an assistant principal myself for 3 years before I became principal now in Alaska. And I knew that there were a lot of people out there doing amazing things, and I knew that there had to be a way for me to connect with them. And I got a lot of professional development in my job as an assistant principal, worked great with my principal then, but knew that there was so much more that I could learn. And we didn't have a mentoring system, and I knew that I needed a mentor to be the best I could be. And so I decided I was just going to go out and find my own mentors. And so that's what I did. So now I've interviewed about 30, 35 principals so far, and the things that I've learned from those interviews is just incredible. You know, I I did a master's degree in educational leadership, and I've learned more in the last year and a half doing the podcast
Whoa.
I ever learned in my master's program. And a real practical, what are you doing right now? How are you managing things? That's what is really amazing. So knowing I need a mentor and then finding those mentors myself and being lucky enough for them to say, sure, you can do that. And then the other part is sharing that with people. That's important. An important part of learning is sharing what you're learning yourself. And thankfully, I've been able to do that and been able to have some success with that so that other people can learn, and it's not just me. When we help everybody learn, we raise everybody up, and that's really the way to do it.
Absolutely. And what are some takeaways that you got from all your interviews with your guests? A couple that come to your mind.
Yeah, it is all about culture at your school. And for your people who are listening, if you're in a school and the culture is not great, you've got to work to change that. The culture requires everybody to work on it. It starts with the leader of the school, which is the principal, and they've got to be the ones setting the tone and doing their best to make it a pleasing atmosphere for everybody. But culture trumps everything. It doesn't matter what kind of a structure or bill schedule you have. Doesn't matter how good your teachers are. If there's not a good culture, then there's not going to be good learning. So you got to do whatever you can to improve the culture, and everybody plays a role in that. But the principal plays a key role in making it possible for everybody else to do something.
It's funny because, we always talk about, well, as teachers at least, and parents, about bullying and the culture that goes on among the kids, but we never really think about the importance of culture among the staff. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's vital because that kind of culture, if it goes among the staff, that it's positive and focused, and teachers don't use sarcasm with kids, then kids follow the models of their behavior. So when the teachers are acting appropriately, the kids are acting appropriately. When the teachers are acting inappropriately, the kids are acting inappropriately. And, that's why I say that it requires everybody to be a participant. So when there are issues with bullying and things like that, the culture that you set as a principal is, we don't tolerate this, we don't stand for this, and we're going to react swiftly and find ways to prevent that from happening again, and make sure everybody knows that bullying is not tolerated.
Absolutely. What are some types of qualities that makes a good school principal?
So I actually read an article about this a couple of weeks ago. That was about one of the other principals here, and I'll have to send you a link to that. But you have to recognize that being a principal is pretty much a 24/7 job.
Okay.
I've heard people describe it to me as being like the pastor of a church, that you are looking out over all of the teachers and students and their families, and all those things matter. So you got to pay attention to everything. I've also heard it described as being a mayor of a small city, because some schools have, up to 2,000 kids in a middle school and up to 5,000 kids in a high school, and some are even bigger than that. And when you've got that many people, then you've got a lot to do. So you got to recognize that 24/7 that you're in charge of a lot of people and a lot of aspects of their lives that you need to pay attention to. And then also you got to really care, and kids and teachers need to know that you care about them and that they are your priority for being there. And if you can't do that, then it's going to be a pretty tough job. And then finally, you got to have integrity. And one of the hardest things about being a principal is having someone make a complaint or report a bullying incident and not being able to say, I really took care of that kid. I can't divulge anything about consequences or talks that I've had with people who aren't that person or their parents. and so sometimes you want to like say, hey, I fixed this, I really did, and that kid's not going to do that anymore, and you just can't say those things. So everybody has to know that you have integrity, that when you say you're going to do something, you're going to do it. When you say you're going to follow up on something, you're going to follow up on it, and you're going to make sure that people's concerns and needs are being addressed, and they're not being left out in the dark, not knowing anything. And they just got to trust that that's actually what's happening, and that's hard. I'm new at my school right now, and nobody knows me, and so they're learning that I have integrity, but it takes time. You got to take time to build that trust.
Oh, okay. And what are some qualities that you've seen from not so good school principals, just so we can learn like how to avoid that?
Sure. I think probably the most difficult one to deal with is principals not doing the hard parts of their job, and that is a principal who allows people to be incompetent and inappropriate, and that from my experience, that does not happen very often, but there are a lot of reasons why a principal may not take action in certain situations, and the worst one is that they're afraid of the backlash. So, we hear a lot in the media about how teachers are really awful and we need to get rid of them. That's totally exaggerated. That's not true. Most teachers are really great. However, there is a small percentage of teachers that don't have kids' best interests at heart. Mm-hmm. And those teachers, we need to find a way to help them improve or help them find a new career. And that's a really hard job, confronting people and saying you're not doing your best. But it's a necessary job. And the same goes for students when principals allow students to get away with things. And sometimes the principals don't know, and that's where I was saying before about everybody builds a culture and lets people know that certain behaviors aren't acceptable for students. Yeah. Letting teachers or students or parents, for that matter, continue acting in ways that harm kids is totally not appropriate. And principals who let those things continue to happen when they know about them, that is definitely the number one quality of a principal you don't want. So those are hard things to do, but you got to do them. That's your job. You're the only person in a school as the principal who can actually do something about it. Absolutely.
And can you share a story of of a school principal who's doing amazing, unprecedented things with her school?
Yeah. So if you go to my website, transformativeprincipal.com, every single one of the principals I've interviewed is doing amazing things. And for a while, I thought that they really were unprecedented. And what I'm learning is that they're just not bragging about it quite as much as everybody else. So all of them are doing great. One that I haven't interviewed yet, that I'm hoping to interview soon, his name is Brad Gustafson, and he's in Minneapolis, and what he is doing is just amazing. And he is a very dynamic leader, very exciting. I actually went to his school and saw what he was doing. He's at an elementary school, and he is just empowering his kids and doing everything great for his kids. So he's definitely putting them first, and everything that helps them makes him more and more fired up and excited about what he's doing. And so his kids were doing a fundraiser for a hospital, Pennies for Patients, up there in Minneapolis, and he had the whole entire fifth grade class, which was about 100 kids, in the library, and he had the PTA working with them to advertise this Pennies for Patients. They had all the kids divided up into different groups of making a podcast, making posters, making envelopes to hold all the money that was collected, making visits to classrooms to promote the Pennies for Patients thing. And it was just amazing how he was able to make sure that everybody was involved and kids were excited to be involved like that. And I mean, these are fifth graders who are learning some important real life marketing skills of how do you communicate an important message to a group of people. And it was really remarkable and inspiring to watch him do that. And he does that with everything that he's involved in. A lot of people are talking about maker spaces right now, and he has mobile maker spaces. So instead of making everybody come to one place, he takes the maker space to the kids and does some pretty cool stuff with that. He got a bunch of sphero balls that had just come in before I got there, and was using those as a station where kids could learn how to code and do some unique things. So there's just one example, and I got to tell you, all over the place, amazing principals are doing amazing things.
Wow. And how have you changed as a principal after interviewing so many of those inspiring principals?
Yeah, it's amazing. I'm acting with much more confidence about the things that I'm doing because I know that they've worked in other places. I've been willing to take more risks to try new things. I've been more humble. I've recognized that I don't have all the answers, and I've been okay telling my teachers that, and my students that, and the parents that. And that's an okay place to be. It's not bad. But the biggest thing, like I said before, was the culture. That culture has to be priority number one, and I'm working really hard to make sure that that's the case. Just this week, I had a teacher come and talk to me about something, and after we talked about it, I realized that I was totally shooting her down. I was telling her in one breath, I want you to make a decision here and be a leader and take ownership of this thing. And in the very next breath, I was telling her how she wasn't going to be able to do it. And I realized that I was totally taking away any opportunity for her to take leadership by how I was interacting with her. So I went the next day and I told her I owed her an apology. And she was like, well, you're the principal. You have to tell me what to do. And I said, yeah, but I can't set you up like that. I can't tell you be a leader and then say, but don't lead like this. You know, I've got to be better than that. So, you know, being able to say those kinds of things, whereas a few years ago, I would have been like, no, I'm the principal. I know best. And that's just not the case. So, you know, I've been able to grow in that area quite a bit. And I think it's made my school better and myself better and my students and my teachers better too.
Awesome. And so what's next for your podcast other than interviewing Brad Gustafson?
You know, that's a great question. I think one of the things that would be good is to synthesize all that information into a digestible format, you know, and maybe I'm not ready for that yet. Maybe I need to interview some more people, but there's a lot of good going on. And after 60 episodes, that's 30 straight hours of listening, which somebody could binge and do, I'm sure, but they may not enjoy that quite as much. So trying to synthesize and bring down that information in a way that's more accessible for people who are coming late to the party so that they can, over time, listen to it, but also be able to digest a lot really quick. So awesome. I don't know. We'll see what life brings us.
Awesome. And what's the best way to get a hold of you and your podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can follow me on Twitter at Jethro Jones, and then my podcast is transformativeprincipal.com. And so you can go there. I've got a newsletter sign up you can do, and you can subscribe to the podcast. And those are the two best ways there.
And to any teens listening to the podcast today, any advice before they cross that bridge into young adulthood?
Yeah. If you are getting ready to go to college or getting ready to go into the workforce or whatever you're doing, I would say go find a mentor and find somebody that you want to be like. And it doesn't have to be in any particular industry or anything like that, but just find an adult that you see and say, you know what, that person is who I want to be like when I grow up. And then just go ask them how you can help them. And they'll probably say, I don't really need any help. And just say, okay, can I just hang out with you for a little while? Can I follow you around? Can I ask you some questions? I believe that most adults really love doing things that make kids around them better and will help the younger generation. And so go find someone and ask them to let you help them, and by helping them, you'll be able to see things that you may not have been able to see before. You'll be able to find the qualities in them that you want to emulate.
Awesome. Jethro, thanks for joining us on the Prepped and Polished podcast. Really appreciate your time.
You're welcome. Thanks so much for having me.
And this wraps up our show today with the Transformative Principal, Jethro Jones. To learn more about Jethro's amazing work with students and his podcast with principals, visit www.jethrojones.com and check out episode 55. We'll be doing our next tutoring tips episode. Thank you for joining us on the Prepped and Polished podcast. Now go out there and take control of your education.
You've been listening to the Prepped and Polished podcast. For more information, check out preppedandpolished.com. Also, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for listening. Class dismissed.